Hey guys, what's up? I got my one of my ultra females here to do this video with me. What I wanted to talk about actually kind of came into mind this past week was snake bites, and it's a common concern for especially new keepers. People like myself, I don't think about it as much. I mean, I do some things to prevent it and whatnot, but it's not a major concern on my mind. I think once you get bit a time or two, you kind of lose a little bit of that concern when you realize it's not really a big deal in most cases. Obviously, there are certain animals where it is a huge deal. If you're keeping venomous or if you're keeping larger constrictors, it can be much more significant to think about. Each species has different teeth, different size teeth, different hit power. Short tails have fairly small teeth, but they hit really, really hard. So I was actually bit about a week ago, a little bit over a week ago, by Rob's female adult ocelot, Borneo shorttail, which is what made me think of it. Now, in that case, the reason that I got bit, she's a total sweetheart, but the reason that I got bit is she's breeding currently, and she's at that point where I think she's fairly close to an ovulation, so she's pounding food really, really hard. Which means that her food response is higher than normal right now. And what I was doing was I was getting ready to pair her, and as you guys may know, I often take the water out before I pair snakes. So she was underneath the paper in her cage, and I decided not to bother her, that I would just take the water out and put Orion in. Well, while I was leaning into her cage taking the water out, she bit me in the forearm here, and it was just a total mistake on my part. All I had to do was lift up the paper, let her see me, we would have been good. But because she didn't, all she saw was my heat signature in there and just assumed it was food because she's so, hyper driven, food driven right now. So she bit and wrapped me. She held me for about 45 seconds and she let go on her own, and then she just sat in my arms like this and let me carry her back to her cage. So she realized very quickly that she made a mistake. So what I want to talk about in this video is ways to avoid snake bites and prevent them through understanding of our animals' behavior, how to read it, things you can do if you get into a situation where an animal starts to act a certain way, other things you can do to be prepared and be safe, and then how you can handle it if you are bit and wrapped, especially. Obviously, if you're just bit, and it's a non-venomous animal, typically it's just put the animal away, clean yourself up, and go on with your life. For the purpose of this video, we're not really going to get into venomous because I don't keep venomous. And I think most people all people that keep venomous should have a plan in place. They shouldn't be relying on such a video. They should already have a plan by the time they're even thinking about getting those animals. The first thing you need to figure out, if you go into your animal's cage, you're going to get the animal out, and they look like they're going to offer, a bite, you have to analyze the behavior and figure out, is this bite defensive behavior or is it a food response? Because how you're going to go about handling it is going to be different. If it's a food response, something like tap training with a hook is one way that you can teach that animal. With my short tails, they know once my hands are on them, that's a sign they're not eating. I'm never ever going to pick them up before I offer them food. Outside of maybe I clean their cage, put them back, and then we go into a feeding session. But they know once my hands are on them that we're not in a feeding situation, which is why you don't ever see my snakes on these videos switch into a feeding response at any point. Now, olive pythons can be a little different. They can turn on that food response at any time. A lot of Australian species can. So those, you gotta read that body language a little bit different. With them, a lot of times you'll feel them bump you in a certain way with their nose or their mouth. Especially those species that like to chew, like a woma or something like that. Anacondas can do that, boa species. So if you feel that behavior, you need to be aware that might be where that's leading to, and take steps to prevent that. Move the animal, change the animal's position, put the animal away, whatever it is you need to do. Now, if you're handling an animal that's defensive, you need to look at why that animal is being defensive. A lot of times it's environmental. It starts with husbandry. So you need to make sure that that animal is comfortable in its cage. We've talked about things like this before. Husbandry is more than just temperatures and humidity. It's also the animal's security, among other things. So if an animal feels insecure in its cage, it tends to carry that behavior over elsewhere. If an animal's very, very happy in their setup, they tend to be more open to handling. Sometimes they might not want to come out initially. But because they're able to go and decompress in that space where they feel comfortable, they're not constantly carrying that state of heightened stress. And so that's why, I'm able to handle my animals this way, because I have them in environments that they're comfortable in. So that's the biggest thing when you're dealing with defensive animals, is to start there and figure out how you can make that animal more relaxed in its setup. Now, it could be temperature or humidity related. Short tails are notorious if they're overheated and too warm. They are nasty, nasty animals. They will light you up. And it can be a difference of a half a degree to a degree over their comfort zone, and that's it. They're just impatient, angry. So a lot of times with short tails, if you have one that's being defensive, the first two places to start are, is their enclosure making them secure, and is their enclosure too warm? Now also, parasites and illness can cause animals to become more defensive. So you do want to pay attention to those things. If you have an animal that's always been great and all of a sudden it's becoming much more agitated and much more defensive, that's a place you can often look. If you've looked at the husbandry, there's no illness there or whatever, look for parasites, look for mites. Snakes can get moody when they have mites because, they've got these parasites crawling all over their body, feeding on their blood and such, and it doesn't feel very good, so they can be pretty agitated. You can see she's pretty relaxed right now, obviously. So if you see body language like this, you're probably good with this species. They're still heavy breathers though, so you probably hear her breathing every once in a while. So anyways, you need to identify the reasons why your snake is behaving the way it is, because the only way that you can kind of counter that behavior is to understand it. So body language is everything. Learning to read not only the species of snake that you're keeping, but the individual animal is really, really imperative. And knowledge goes a long way in making you feel better, making you feel safer. So the more you understand the animal, how it's behaving, and how you can change or affect that behavior, the better experience you're going to have handling your animals. Sometimes animals have a bad day. So if you go in, you're going in to clean, and the animal's just in a foul mood, if it's not imperative that you get in there right then, leave the animal, come back the next morning, come back later on in the day and check. It depends on what you're going in there for. But if the animal's in that bad of a mood where you're going to potentially create a negative situation that might affect your relationship with that animal long term, if it can wait, then all the better. Obviously, there's certain times where for the animal's health and safety, you have to do what you're doing at that time, in which case you just need to try to push through in the least invasive manner that you can. So that's why, for instance, with my adult female white lip, I have a shift box so that I can get her out of there when I need to without having to put her through a bunch of stress and further strain the relationship that her and I have. So things like that are ways that you can do that to avoid getting into a situation where you're going to get bit by the animal. Now, if you're working with larger constrictors, obviously, to keep yourself safe, one of the biggest things is don't let the animal ever get around your neck. You see a lot of people doing that. Everybody has those classic pictures. I did it in my early days of keeping, but it's not sound. That's one of your most vulnerable spots. And just like snakes tend to protect their head and tail, their vulnerable spots, we need to protect ours. So I might let a snake go up onto my shoulder, but I don't ever let them get across my neck. I don't ever let them get in a position where all of a sudden they could panic and tighten and I'm in trouble. Just not a good idea. Even a snake this size is capable of putting you down. If they get you right around the neck, it only takes a couple of seconds to stop the blood flow to your brain and to make you pass out. Anybody that does martial arts and those kinds of things knows it's very, very simple to get somebody in the right place and put them out within a couple of seconds. So this whole, oh, well, I'm so strong, it won't happen to me, is bullshit. It's ignorant, and you're asking to put yourself in trouble. I saw that recently in the retic community where a few people were saying, somebody was joking about the fact that all the retic community is either like, short, fat guys or these like absolute, muscle maniacs, whatever the term you want to use. And I saw a bunch of the retic keepers defending that, saying that, oh, well, you have to be super strong to work with these animals. Strength has nothing to do with it. Understanding your animals, understanding their behavior, putting yourself in positions to work safely, that's what matters, because a truly large constrictor, the strongest man or woman on earth is not stronger than that animal if that animal is motivated. So you can work out every day of your life, you can get up and you can do whatever you want to do and eat right and all that stuff. You are not stronger than that animal. Especially once that animal gets a coil or two around you, there's no way. So that's why zoos and institutions have multiple people on hand based on the size of the snake. I don't know where the rules are now. If memory serves, it used to be anything over 6 feet required an additional person, and then every 3 feet after that was another person. I don't know if that's still the way they operate or whatever. Things change all the time. But generally speaking, having at least a second person on hand when you're handling large constrictors is going to keep you safer. If nothing else, they can call for additional help or are able to do things. I can tell you a few times that I've been bit and wrapped. It's ended up in situations where both my hands are compromised and I don't have a free hand to help myself. That happened with the short tail that just got me, because as she climbed out and wrapped this arm, I supported her body with my other arm, and then she got both of them wrapped. Now, in that situation, I wasn't in any danger. She has my arms wrapped. I'm not going to die from my arms wrapped. So it's not a huge deal for me because I'm comfortable with it. I waited her out. I actually walked into the bathroom. I was going to turn on the water, which is a way that you can get snakes to let go. So what I have done with my olive pythons in the past, after they don't let go for about 15 minutes, is I turn on both my hot and cold water, full bore, on the tub spout, and I'll stick the animal right underneath there where their mouth is, so that either they're going to let go or they're going to be in trouble. Get their fight or flight response, and typically they're gonna flight. Obviously, be careful because you could hurt the animal. So you need to make sure that their safety is on your mind as well. And that's the biggest thing with preventing snake bites. The reason that you try not to get bit, it's just as much for their safety as yours. Most of the things that they're going to bite in the wild, they're intending to eat. Their teeth are typically recurved, meaning that they're curved back towards their throat because that way the prey can slide that way. It's not designed to go back out the other direction. So when we get bit and they let go, sometimes they can lose teeth. Sometimes, something could happen in their mouth where a tooth gets broken and they can get infected. So if you can prevent snake bites, you're also helping the animal out as well. And don't ever, unless you absolutely have to, remove a snake that's biting you. Let them let go, or put them in a situation where they're going to want to let go. That's the safest way for you and for them. Don't pull away. When a snake strikes and you're getting bit, don't pull away, because you'll do more damage to yourself and to them if you do. Once again, like I said, those recurved teeth, all you're doing is pulling against that grain and you're just going to rip. And whether it rips their teeth or whether it rips your flesh, one thing or the other or both are going to rip. Now, obviously, certain animals are more dangerous with bites. Male reticulated pythons, when they're breeding, are probably one of the most dangerous animals people can keep. Those teeth are designed a little bit differently. They're basically designed to cleave flesh from bone. So if you get bit by a male when he's in that breeding mode, which is one of those things where you need to learn to read that behavior, and that's definitely a time where you're probably going to want to leave that animal be. If you see them arching and doing all those kinds of things. And hopefully if you have retics, especially male retics, you understand that behavior. The amount of people that don't and that keep those animals is truly scary, because you're putting yourself in a situation where you could very, very easily bleed out from a bite like that, especially if you don't get medical attention right away. And this video is not meant to scare anybody. It's not meant to demonize these animals, but we do need to be prepared, understand what we're working with, understand how to work with them, and how to mitigate risks and how to keep our animals safe. So like I said, the water is one method, keeping a bottle of something like rubbing alcohol on hand, even mouthwash, something like that, different things that you can have handy if you get bit and the animal's not letting go. Now, if you have something like a ball python and it bites and wraps you, hopefully you're not getting to the point where you're doing things like that. You could wait that animal out for a little while. Even my short tails, I've done it with my olive python. It takes about 15 minutes before I say, okay, enough of that, and try to get the animal to let go with that water first. Water is always my first go-to. But obviously, if you're dealing with a 20-foot reticulated python, you can't just walk around with that snake as it's biting you and wrapping you and everything. So having stuff close to you and having an additional person or people there to help you get those things that you need to keep you safe is definitely a thing. Using proper tools, using hooks with animals that you should be using hooks with. Bloods and short tails I really don't, because it doesn't make sense because of their heavy-bodied nature. But just things like this, supporting the animal with two hands, keeping the animal comfortable, is going to prevent her from feeling like she needs to be vulnerable or she's in a position. Having animals that you've raised definitely helps, because all they understand is how you do things. And so oftentimes once your relationship is established, you can get away with a lot more than you could with somebody else's animal. So if I went and grabbed, a friend of mine's short tail and held it like this, it might not go as well, because the animal might not feel the level of security this animal feels with me because of the relationship we've built. So all these creatures may not be social and have a social structure as we understand it. You can build working relationships with them. You can have that animal learn that you're not a threat, that you're not a food source, and that they can feel comfortable around you. And it gets to the point where with some animals, like I'll take them outside and something will make them nervous and they actually come back to me. And it's not the same way like, a child runs to their mother for protection. It's just, okay, I know that I've been safe over there before, let me go there and maybe I'll be safe there again. So it's not an emotional response. It's just they've learned that you are a point of safety for them, for the past however many years. So in a time of trouble, they're going to look for that consistency. So definitely, make sure that you're working to keep your animals safe and yourself safe. I've kept snakes for like 18 years now. You figure I've probably had over 100,000 handling sessions with snakes, which is probably a fairly conservative number. That's averaging about 20 a day, and there's days where I'm touching 150 snakes. So, and there's very few days where I'm touching none. But even that, over 100,000 times, I've been bit start to finish maybe 20 times keeping snakes. And all of those bites were preventable. Most of them were situations like I described at the beginning of this video where I was just lazy, where I could have prevented it with a little bit more concern, but I was just trying to be lazy or trying to do something quicker than I should, or reading the animal's body language, the animal telling me, hey, I'm uncomfortable, and me saying, it'll be fine anyways, let me just push through. And sometimes it's not. I would also say 4 or 5 of those bites were me just not paying attention at all. One, I was trying to photograph an animal that was in an uncomfortable situation for that animal. I was trying to get the photos done quick, and I was paying more attention to the screen than I was to the animal. When I first got incognito, she got me with a food response because Kara at that time had been feeding her fresh killed. I was offering her her first frozen thawed. So I was just going to videotape that just to send it to Kara and say, hey, here's how she did the frozen thawed. And being that it was her first time, she locked on to the higher heat signature, which was me. And I was paying more attention to the screen because I had just gotten a smartphone for the first time, trying to learn how to use it. And so I took a food response from her because I wasn't paying attention. So those are a couple of bites right there I could cross off the list. That one the other day, had I just lifted up the paper, I could have prevented. One time with one of my female olive pythons, she was coming up and I could see that she was coming up with intent. And instead of stopping her, I said, well, let's see how far she's going to take it. And she bit me. And so that was an easily preventable one that I should have prevented and I did not. So it's been, I would say, one bite ever that I've taken was totally unexpected. and I just wasn't paying attention. I was in my kitchen talking to somebody. I had a baby snake in my hands. You know, I'm talking to them, moving around, doing my thing, and the snake bit me in the hand. That's the only bite ever that I didn't know was coming, that and I could have prevented it by just paying attention. I'm sure the animal gave warning signs, as short tails tend to do. I just wasn't paying attention. But yeah, I've never had a bite where I couldn't see it coming or I didn't know what was going to happen. My first snake bite was a banana phase California king snake. And even that time, the first bite that I ever took, I knew that one was coming, and I decided to let it happen because I was very apprehensive about getting bit, like I think most people are. So I decided to just let myself get bit so that I could get over it. And it definitely helped me immensely because I just said, okay, wow, why am I even worried about this? It barely broke the skin. You know, there's some other techniques too. If you guys watch the video of my top 5, it was a little over the top with how much I had to move just because I was outside with her, and I'm more aware of how her mood can change outside. But with my rock python, I was consistently spinning and shifting, which changes their line of sight. And so instead of them focusing on you, now they're looking around, being prepared for what might be coming from a different direction, or where they need to be prepared to flee to if they're nervous. So sometimes just moving the animals around like that, as you can see, changes her behavior. Now she's tongue flicking, she's looking around, whatever. Now in this case, she's not nervous about it because she's used to me. But it's a tool in your arsenal where if a snake's coming at you, you can kind of spin around and move and change that, and at least get their attention off of you for a moment, so that you can safely get them back into their enclosure or into a holding bin, or just to prevent that bite for the time being. So definitely, as I said in closing, understand your animal's behavior, understand why they're biting, understand why they might potentially bite, and mitigate those things through proper handling, through working with the animal, teaching the animal that it can trust you, having positive handling sessions. If you're working with a new animal that's nervous and you have even 1 minute, 2 minute, 3 minute session where everything goes really well, put the animal away. Don't wait until it gets to that point where the animal's responding negatively. If you can get that animal back into its enclosure and comfortable with a totally positive session, it only really takes a few of those to get most animals to kind of say, hey, you know what? This isn't so bad. Especially snakes like these guys. Short tails are pretty smart animals. As babies, they might be more nervous, but they get over it really, really quickly with just slow, steady work. I've done videos on that in the past. Less is more when you're trying to tame these guys down. Let them get comfortable in their cage. Some of these snakes I don't even mess with for the first 5 or 6 months outside of cleaning. Just really let them settle in. A snake like this that I've had for a while, and as you can see, everything about her behavior throughout this video just suggests that she's totally content and comfortable. I mean, she's letting me have her body hang like this. A lot of short tails get nervous with that. Now, I still have her supported with 2 hands, but this is a very unnatural position for a snake to be in of this type. They're not usually climbers or whatever. So to get a snake to be comfortable in a very unnatural position takes some time. So the more natural you can keep things in the beginning, the better off you'll be. So hopefully you guys find this video helpful, on preventing snake bites especially, but learning to be prepared for them, how to handle them, and make sure you do it safely. All right, we'll see you guys later. Have a good one.